Across our border now, and the situation in eSwatini is looking increasingly serious. We know that schools are under siege, and we heard earlier this week about that following pro-democracy protests in June, school children now have taken up the call for democratic reforms, chief among them for a democratically elected prime minister, not one appointed by the king. The government says children are being manipulated into protesting and destroying school property. But the Swaziland National Association of Teachers has told us this week that is not the case. They're condemning the authorities for a very harsh crackdown. It's landed several children in hospital. And just this afternoon, more information coming through reports I've read on News 24. A very serious situation with the protests spreading, we understand, to the transport sector. Also a report that one person was killed earlier this week. Let's get the very latest now. I'm joined by Shenilla Mohamed. She's Executive Director of Amnesty International South Africa. Thanks so much for joining us. What reports are you getting about the situation in eSwatini at the moment?
Good evening, Sally, and good evening to your viewers. Well, as you rightly say, the situation is worsening. It's getting really, it has been worrying for some time now. The crackdown on the peaceful protests is increasing. We've also heard reports of one person, another person being killed. We must remember that, there have been reports of up to 27, and in some cases, even reports of up to 100 people dying, since the protest action started in about May. And we're also hearing of continuing blackouts of social media. There was a blackout today of about 2 hours, and this is not the first time. I mean, there is a rolling blackout that continues to happen on social media because basically the eSwatini government does not want the news of what is happening on the ground to continue to come out of the country. But the situation there is worrying because, we don't see the government restraining themselves at all in the crackdown. And of course, as you might know, that they've recently deployed soldiers into the streets as well.
Yeah, and some of the images that we have seen this week, one particular image of a schoolgirl being carried to a car, I mean, it was almost reminiscent of Hector Peterson, and it's chilling to see those images. I mean, when they're turning their guns on school children, that is very worrying indeed. Where do you predict and where do you worry it's going to end? I mean, are there global calls to intervene now? Are there efforts to try and quell this? What is the international community doing?
Well, I think the international community as a whole has come out very much condemning what is happening on the ground. We've heard condemnation from the United Nations. We've heard condemnation from, organizations like Amnesty and other organizations. And of course, what is happening there, Sally, is, that the state is continuing to use live ammunition, tear gas on these protesters, and is basically depriving them of their right to protest, depriving them of their basic human rights. And of course, we're seeing arrests, we're seeing students that have been arrested, students that have been killed, students that have been injured. Of course, this is not acceptable. And I think what we're calling on the eSwatini government to do is to stop immediately with these clampdowns on these peaceful protesters, and to basically hold those who have killed or have been responsible for allegedly killing these protesters to be brought to account, because the killing of peaceful protesters is in violation of their basic rights, and to basically listen to the calls being made by the people. This has been going on for some time now, and this is not stemming from a new reaction. I mean, people have been talking about the deprivation of rights in the economic, social, political spheres for months now. And, the demands for them to have control over their democracy is something that the government should listen to. And that is what we're calling on them to do. And I think our biggest worry is that if this does not cease with immediate effect, we are going to see more innocent protesters dying, and we are going to see more violence against the citizens of eSwatini. Sorry.
So when you that's a strong message, but the eSwatini government, and I was just reading a News 24 article just a few moments ago where there was one person who was killed, we understand, on Wednesday, and what the government said is this person was causing problems. He was on he was being violent, and the police tried to calm him down, and the protesters were throwing rocks and they attacked us, and it's all pushed at the door of the protesters, saying that they're violent, they're destructive, they're causing the problems. What is your response when you hear what the government is saying?
Well, look, as Amnesty International, we're trying to record and document cases of this excessive use of force and violence against the people of Eswatini. And of course, our response to the state is that, that their response is unacceptable. They cannot use excessive force. It goes against international human law. It goes against, all laws about the use of excessive force and live ammunition on protesters. And so what we're saying to the Eswatini government is that they need to exercise restraint. The loss of even one life is unacceptable. And of course, we are also calling on the ICC, the United Nations, and other international organizations to also document what is happening on the ground. Because at the end of the day, Sally, everyone who has played a part in the loss of life of innocent people has got to be held accountable, whether it's through the international community or through the courts of Eswatini. But what is happening in Eswatini is really unacceptable. And, we can't even ascertain how many people have actually died because there's such a blackout of information there. And I think that, it's important for organizations like ours and other human rights organizations to continue to document what is happening on the ground, so at some point the victims of this brutality can get the justice that they deserve.
Well, thank you very much for updating us this evening. That is Shenilla Mohamed of Amnesty International South Africa.